Welcome back to the Two Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and first solo pod of the NBA year is here. We're going to talk James Harden getting traded to the Clippers, NBA opening week. We're going to play a little game, play a couple of things here with week one observations in 4 words or less. A lot of the highlights of the things that I've seen, and only 3 to 4 games for most of these teams. So this isn't supposed to be, it's not necessarily supposed to be like an overreactions like we've done in the past. Would love to have done that, but just trying to get the right. I didn't feel like I didn't see enough this year to overreact to anything in the first 4 games. So just want to talk a couple observations. Before we do that, don't forget Two Pointers is sponsored by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the presenting sponsor of Two Pointers podcast. You can get $20 off your first purchase in the SeatGeek app or SeatGeek.com. Link in the top of the description. Code 2 Pointers. $20 off all of the sports. I think as of yesterday, I'm recording this on Halloween afternoon. As of the 30th, I think we had all 5 major sports playing with multiple playoffs, the World Series, MLS, NBA, all the fun stuff. So I want to talk a couple of things. I was actually supposed to record this on the 30th, but here we are. I waited a day. No real hunch. I would love to say that I had a hunch here, but anything can happen in the NBA, and I wanted to give it one more game, see some of the Magic Lakers game last night. I had to catch back up in the morning because these 10:30 Eastern tips are already getting to me here out on the East Coast. But I want to talk a couple things here. James Harden being traded to the Clippers at what ended up being 2 o'clock local time for me, 11 o'clock. And this is, like Woj reported, this is not the first time these two teams have done this. There was I believe it was Tobias Harris deal happened at 2 o'clock in the morning as well in the past. So these two teams need to stop doing this if they're going to be continuing to make deals. I'll talk about a little bit on both sides. Just talking about the trade at first, though. The Clippers send Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, KJ Martin, 2026, 2028 first-round picks, 2 second-rounders, and a pick swap. I believe that pick swap is in 27, if I'm correct, and we'll get to that. And the Sixers send James Harden and PJ Tucker. Just quick reactions to it is, look, I've made it very clear in the past, especially now recently. I think I've talked about it once since we started doing pods again this year with the NBA. I think giving up anything for James Harden right now, especially with I know the whole could have been promised a contract, and that's what severed that relationship with Daryl Morey, and obviously going over to China, James is going to be putting out his best foot forward there against Daryl Morey over the summer. But I don't care what the promise was on the board. This is the new normal with James Harden. This is what we're seeing and what we understand about James Harden as an off-the-court player. And I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but we've seen enough of this antic that we can't anymore. At least I can't anymore, because when you understand the context of whether that contract was on the table or not, this still affects how he has to play on the court. Of course, the whole leaving him off the plane, obviously it's not his fault, whatever, which tells me obviously that this deal was probably pending. But 3 first-round picks for James Harden at this point in his career, I understand he led the league in assists last year. I understand that he was dynamic as a scorer when he wasn't, having to attack the basket as much. Like, I get all that. But what this does for Philly is, I'll just get into Philly thing for a second. This is addition by subtraction, right? Philly's going to be able to say, here you go, Tyrese Maxey, and I'll get to the other part of the Philly part in a second. But this unlocks Tyrese Maxey completely, right? This ask him to be a playmaker more. This is going to put the ball in his hands more. And obviously the Joel Embiid, this is something we have to monitor now, because, this is the world we live in with the NBA, watching how guys react to things in the news and the media. Whether we think Joel Embiid's just going to be unhappy and say, in February, trade me to the Knicks or whatever, right? But, I think this is good. I think this is good for Philly. I'm always going to be right now in the where we are with the James Harden point of his career, the arc of his career. That I always think if you don't have James Harden on your team, especially in this case for Philly, I think it can be better, because obviously we haven't seen how he's going to play this year with Joel Embiid. I know, again, the whole assist leader thing last year. I don't, spare me the details there. I don't think the rotational pieces they acquired, though, are going to really make any difference. That's the kind of the issue here, and that brings me to my second point on Philly. Philly does think that there's this deal here, that they think this draft capital they received for the Harden deal can unlock this this player, right? This ultimate, we're going to get somebody else out there to replace James Harden's production from last year. Although I think, again, depth being a problem, not having another guy outside of Maxey that you can really rely on a night-to-night basis. I know that Tobias Harris is paid like that, or was, I guess, at the time when that contract was one of the highest in the NBA. I think this team is exactly where I project them to be, and they're under their win total of, I think it was 49.5 and then came down to 47.5. Grayson and I still both agreed that was a ridiculous number for Philly with so many question marks. Joel Embiid can only carry you so much, and if you really want him to be the player he's going to be in the playoffs, this is the kind of deal that you're going to be putting yourself in a position where Tyrese Maxey is going to be your guy every night. And we've seen them win games with without Joel Embiid. They'll play a lot of the teams on the road, and they'll pick up those wins that are against like your Portlands and things like that, right? But if Philly is truly the title contender they want to be, that trade has to happen with that draft capital for James Harden. And as of this moment, Woj made a great point on his pod, with what little sleep he did have from this trade being done at 2:00 in the morning. But, the trade right now, whatever it is, again, not really anybody disgruntled right now that we know of, not really. I'm not sure there's a perfect answer for who that player might be. I mean, maybe it's Mike Conley if Minnesota wants to get, switch things up. But what does Minnesota get out of that? Other than draft capital I know they're sparse there. This is just off the top of my head. Dennis Schroeder from Toronto. Toronto retained him for a reason, or brought him in for a reason, after Fred VanVleet's departure. So I don't know. Regardless of what the deal is, Woj's point was you'd be overpaying for whatever that is right now. And I 100% agree. So whatever Daryl Morey and the organization thinks they're going to get, they have the capital at least to think that player is out there. And they've obviously got the salary filler there, Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, who I think can be important. But a lot of these guys at their age, KJ Martin being a young, promising player, but Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, and Nicholas Batum, I don't see being these impactful, role players that we think they were for the Clippers. And getting to the Clippers in a second, the depth's going to be just, a ridiculous question mark for them giving up three players, even if they were impactful for them. I just don't know if they're going to necessarily be as important for Philly. The Philly thing, again, 5 in the East is best case scenario, and I was projecting they had Maxey and Embiid for most of the year together. Again, all of this commentary is hinged on the fact that there is a deal out there eventually, and we know how the NBA can change literally and figuratively overnight, and that deal could be out there anytime and anywhere. So Philly is to be determined there in terms of how I think this fully shapes out, but fully I'm going to lean on my old ways here and tell you that it's addition by subtraction because of just everything that James Harden was going to bring from didn't want to be their standpoint, even if they let him play. The locker room idea of him being there and them not playing and then not letting him get on the plane and all that stuff, Philly was willing to take whatever the fine was with the new rules of the sitting players who were all, recent All-Stars and recent All-NBA people, and they were willing to take whatever that repercussion was to try to figure out a way to keep him out of the locker room and get this done. So again, I think addition by subtraction, and Philly fans should probably be pretty happy about the result. On the Clippers side of it, I think both these teams, I can't even begin to believe that this was the best case scenario for the Clippers, and I cannot believe it took this much. So Nick Wright posted this on X after the trade happened. I think it provides really good context for how this year's Los Angeles Clippers team is completely and entirely all in. And like I said, Grayson and I talking about the over-under spot. If you haven't checked that out, the win total spot, whatever you want to call it for the Western Conference, I'll link it below and put it on the little eye up there at the corner for YouTube. But we talked about how there's just no reason that I'm guaranteed X amount of games from the likes of Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, even some of their role play. Russell Westbrook is going to have to be a really important player for you. So thinking about how James Harden last year, I know how he was really, really important, but he averaged, he only played, I think it was 50-something games, right? Last year, shout out to Best Words for changing, 58 games, right? Which is right at that league minimum for any kind of award. So that's kind of your threshold for what a star should be playing at least. And I'm not sure that's going to be really beneficial to you. James Harden and Russell Westbrook being on a team is a storyline in and of itself. But the context of what Nick Wright posted about being all in this year, Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook are all free agents at the end of this season, right? The new arena will be done, I believe it's 24-25, so the beginning of next season. If not, it's the year after. People are saying that this is a tie into that, if you can retain him, yada, yada, yada. I'm not sure I want to take a chance, regardless of a new arena that's going to cost me $2.5 billion if I'm Steve Ballmer. There's no future here. You have to retain these guys. That's kind of they're banking on that, and they're putting their eggs in a really, really fragile, broken basket, right? You're putting it in the hands of Russell Westbrook, James Harden, again, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George, who haven't played a lick near what they should be for what they're worth and what they're asked to be. So here's what the first round picks look like, and what I mentioned about the new stadium is how kind of pigeonholed this team really is. Their future first round picks look like this. In 24, it's going to Oklahoma City. 25, it'll be a swap with Oklahoma City. 26 would be a swap, not a swap, but 26 will go straight to Oklahoma City. 27 will be a swap with Oklahoma City. Sam Presti just wins. 28 is goes to Philly. 29 is the swap with Philly, so I had that backwards 20 earlier. 29 is a swap with Philly in that James Harden deal that just happened. And then they've also traded away 6 second-round picks. So this team is decimated from a capital standpoint. And, again, $2.5 billion arena or whatever that number ended up getting to, you're putting your next 3 years, even just as on a low point, that Kawhi Leonard, Paul George may be fully healthy again and play. And if James Harden, sure, can unlock something, obviously it'll be the best playmaker that Kawhi and PG have ever had together as a team. So I don't see why that would hurt them. But I think this trade is so much more meaningful for the long term of this franchise. And I say meaningful in this case in a really negative manner. This is going to be like, if the Clippers don't make the finals this year, like this is a failed experiment. And I know that we typically see it's the second year, right? So again, the retainer is going to have to be so important there. If they don't retain these guys properly, then they literally just leveraged, what did we say earlier? They leveraged 28, 29, and then a swap at some point. So they leveraged 3 first-round picks and then a couple of seconds somewhere in there, I think, too. They leveraged all of their future at the end of this decade for 5.5 months of James Harden. I can't comprehend how that makes any sense. And I know this is kind of like you got to do it, you got to figure it out later kind of thing. But again, addition by subtraction, not having James Harden. I know I wasn't high on the Clippers, like I said, in the Western Conference win total spot, but I don't know. Like, I can't understand how the contractual obligation to these guys after this year, or the lack thereof, is going to be something that wasn't at the forefront of this decision, right? Like, they obviously feel confident that they're going to be able to retain Kawhi and Paul George. I mean, I'm not aggregating anything there. I'm just saying, like, you don't do this kind of deal. Russell Westbrook, obviously, on some kind of small minimum contract is already less of a point here, but he's someone's going to play meaningful minutes for them, and how those 4 are going to work together, combined with Zubac or Plumlee or however they want to do it. I'm just not sure anybody won this trade, and I'm not sure I'm going to feel that way. I'm sure I'm going to feel that way probably for the next 6 to 12 months. I honestly, if you ask me this in a couple of years, I'm going to tell you that this was one of the craziest, gets, or getting what it took to get somebody. I understand, again, Harden's caliber player when he's fully healthy and what we see on the court. The same goes for Kyrie Irving and somebody like that. I know he's not going to catch strays here, or you weren't expecting him to catch strays probably, but I can't leverage the way that the Clippers did in the hands of guys that A, don't play, B, don't give me any motivation in and outside of the basketball court for 6 months, and see how they're going to play. And a guy that, quite frankly, in Russell Westbrook's case, is just not in the place he was earlier in his career. All right, coming back. Let's do the week 1 observations in 4 words or less. I haven't had a chance to watch every single team play. I know some of the dudes out there, like the Ball Game podcast, shout out to Chris, Matt. They've done the 1 observation or 1 something like that of every single team. I have not had a chance to do that, unfortunately, but I've watched a couple of really important teams here, so that I think provide good context for the year. I'll start with Denver, because on opening night, they got the big win against the Lakers. 4 words, good luck against Denver. Denver, as I mentioned in the West win totals pod, once again, they are the prohibitive favorite once again. I think Jokic is an MVP candidate, as always. People are overblowing the Bruce Brown minutes completely out of the water, and they'll be completely fine. Christian Brown's minutes have been unbelievable, replacing Bruce Brown. There's a really funny moment there where they were up enough in the Kings game. He was sitting most of the third quarter, Brown was, and he was in his warm-ups, and he was right behind Mike Malone as they were coming out of the into a timeout, and they were high-fiving, and Christian Brown looks like the coach's son, but when he's out there, he sure as heck doesn't play like that. So they're the best team in the league again. Not much on Denver. The passing, just as a team as a whole, Aaron Gordon has shown some increased playmaking flashes. I think the team's just built to win it all again, and Jokic on a casual night can have 30, 10, and 10. And it's not even fair for opposing defenses to where you're getting the kind of potential you're getting from one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world, that I would pin him as. The Lakers, crunch time is questionable. It has been questionable, mostly from, the likes of D'Angelo Russell. I, wasn't a fan of the signing, wasn't a fan of having him back last year, and so far in their start, he has not impressed me. I know he had a decent game last night against the Magic. I got to finish that one there. Again, these 10:30 Eastern tips are killing me, like I said at the top. The crunch time lineup with 4:45 remaining in the overtime loss to the Kings, 4:45 remaining in regulation, was D'Lo, Gabe Vincent, Taurean Prince, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis. And I understand Austin Reeves was like 1 for 10 and was struggling, and he ended up playing less than 4 minutes in the remaining part of the 2 quarters there in the second half. I don't think that lineup matches well at all with the Kings, who had Fox, Herter, Barnes, Murray, and Sabonis. You have 4 guys, and even 5 really, if you think Fox and Sabonis can hit the 3 and step out and do that. But you have 3 guys that are completely dynamic from that range, and it completely wasn't matchup friendly whatsoever for the Lakers. And I know, again, with Austin Reeves, maybe you put him on Herter, and that disguises some of the defensive identity there. But I don't understand, especially when you have a guy like Reeves who's struggling. I don't understand how D'Lo and Vincent are expected to come in and be these adamant floor spacers for where LeBron's gonna have to. You're forcing LeBron to play point guard, which we know he can do. But based off the minutes restriction in Game 1 against Denver, and then immediately turns around and plays like 39 the next night. So what you're asking LeBron to do on a night-to-night basis in his 38-year-old or 21st season in the NBA, 39-year-old. Shouldn't change. The goalposts can't move there. So we got to be able to figure out a better way down the stretch. The Lakers have to figure out a way to utilize their lineup better. Like, their depth's really good. Like, I made that clear earlier in this offseason, or this preseason, I guess, talking about what their depth can provide. Christian Wood's minutes, I don't want him touching crunch time. Obviously, that makes a difference. But they have guys that they can play throughout the game, and even if injuries happen and they sustain themselves, I just, the Rui minutes have been inconsistent at best. But there's a couple of things there that I think they need to work on, specifically crunch time and figuring out a balance between, having 3-point shooting that you can quote unquote rely on, and then still being able to defend the rim. So, Sacramento Kings. I tried to get creative and cute with this one. I don't have much to say on the Kings so far. They look exactly the same, and they look fun. The beam will be lit 45 plus times again. They'll end up, we'll see some regression probably just from the West got better standpoint. I've already made that point enough, but I just simply went with Sacramento Kings have continuity. I mean, the continuity is ridiculous. They added overseas, I don't have him in front of me now, but they added the guy who won the EuroLeague MVP overseas, who was a dynamic scorer. He's already played really big, meaningful minutes for them. But their continuity is insane. The same lineup that, beat the Warriors last year with Herter, Fox, Barnes, Murray, and Sabonis. Obviously, they're going to have to figure out some of the defensive liability stuff with Sabonis in the playoffs. I know he had an injury, but, he was taken advantage of there by the team in the second round last playoffs there, the Lakers and Kings. The Milwaukee Bucks, I couldn't figure out a really good forward here, but I just put dynamic duo we expected. Watching that opening game against Philly, the way defenders have to play Damian Lillard is something they've never seen with a player like Giannis, who, when you think of two-man game right now, you think of Jamal Murray and you think of Nikola Jokic. That is your quintessential NBA two-man game. But when you have a guy like Damian Lillard who will force a defender to play him at the 35-foot area where he can make that three, basically crossing over the half-court line, calling for a high pick and roll. This is something that defenders have never had to do against Giannis. And then as they come down, Giannis will have time to get downhill. Dame will have time to get downhill, and it's going to put Giannis in a lot better spots on rolls and on playmaking flashes through the middle of the play there. But Damian Lillard and Giannis' two-man game is really, really impressive. And if you didn't see it, I was going to be funny about this, but I didn't think of the four words here. But Flava Flav sang the national anthem, and it's worth the watch if you haven't seen it. Last few teams here. The San Antonio Spurs, just enjoy watching Wemby play, right? I guess for the four words, for those that be in the comments there. Enjoy watching Wemby play. I know coming into the year and just through the draft process over the last 2 years with him, we had these unrealistic expectations of what we expect from a guy like that. And I know that there were NBA GMs privately saying to Woj that, within 3 years we'll be seeing the best player in the NBA and even the best player in the world. And I'm just not ready for that yet. Like, the Spurs are not good. They don't have a point guard. That's no disrespect to Trey Jones, but they don't have a true point guard. The way the offense is set up with Keldon Johnson, who obviously can be a good playmaker at his size there, they've just been giving the ball to Wemby on offense and letting him cook. And it's been really fun to watch. And I just don't want to put these ridiculous expectations on him and a team that, quite frankly, with 27.5, I believe, was their win total. I mean, they won 22 games last year. Yeah, is he worth 5 to 7 wins? Maybe. It seems like he might be. But putting these ridiculous expectations on him, which will then in turn put expectations on the team, they're going to stink, and that's totally fine, because guess what? Rome wasn't built in a day, right? People say that expression every single day. It's a really old saying. But, Victor Wembanyama has been so much fun to watch. I was not shocked when the Dallas Mavericks Spurs game broke whatever the NBA season record was for the regular season viewership for the one game or something like that. It broke some ridiculous record by like a couple million people watching it, and I was one of them. That game was really fun. Not much analysis there, but just seeing some of the stuff he does on offense, and then just the ability to think that no matter what, once per game, we're going to see him have the ability with an 8-foot wingspan to block a three-point shot is unlike anything we've ever seen before, and we should just relish it. We should just sit there and relish and enjoy it. There should be nothing wrong with that. So taper the expectations for the Spurs. Again, lack of the point guard is going to be something that's really important for me to keep an eye on what they do in the future with that decision. They've got some guys that are, like I said, strong playmakers at bigger sizes, like Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell. But Victor Wembanyama, just give him the ball. Let him play ridiculous perimeter and inside defense, and we'll see what happens. The last one's one that's fun that I may regret from my preseason predictions for the Eastern Conference, but the Detroit Pistons, Jalen Duren is him. Third in the NBA in total rebounds. His stats this year, he's 15.5 a game, 13.3 rebounds. I've got him in fantasy as well, so super excited to see his production. 3.3 assists, shooting 68% from the field on 10 attempts per game, which is crazy efficient. 30 minutes a game there, and then also putting in 0.8 steals and 2 blocks a game. So we're seeing what he can do and benefit from having a really strong, couple of playmakers around him as well, contrary to the situation we saw at Memphis, which you have to, from an evaluator standpoint, from the NBA drafts, the way we look at guys coming in and their situations and things. This is a perfect example of what a year, especially development, can be in an offense that you're unfamiliar with as a rookie. Coming from a place like Memphis where, to say he had a good playmaker would be fallacy. Like, to see that he's going to be able to get the ball in better spots, being a more dynamic roller, a rim threat. Like I said, he's always been a great rebounder. So putting in positions to be successful and simplifying the game, which has been really, really fun to watch. What I'll regret saying, like I said in the Eastern Conference preview, but is that Detroit, every year there's this young team, it seems like, or every couple years there's this young team that makes a jump, and it may be Detroit. I just am not super sold on how Monty Williams can be the coach right now for this team. But obviously, he was used to a more veteran experience roster when he was in Phoenix, and I do think he's a good coach. I wonder how the offense will look once they figure out what their starting lineup is, which I think he's starting to make most changes and make those adjustments. So Monty Williams, I have no question marks as a coach. I'm giving him time, and I think there may be growing pains there for Detroit. I know this is an early start there. Had a great, couple of games here. Jalen Duren being a big reason for it. I think Jaden Ivey's also taken some leaps as well. But Jalen Duren is him. He's looked really, really good so far, and you should expect much of the same if they continue to get him the ball, like I said, in efficient places and be able to utilize his skill set the best. All right, I'll close with this. Wanted to do this every couple of weeks. Hopefully, we'll get better at getting them out more consistently, depending on the way the schedule looks. It just depends on what my feelings are at the time. But as you've heard before in previous episodes, Sign Up Expert is the presenting sponsor for any gambling segments or podcasts on the Two Pointers podcast now. Shout out to Sign Up Expert. You can go to signupexpert.com/TPP to sign up for any exclusive promotions on sportsbooks and daily fantasy in your area. Just select your country and region if you're in Canada, or province as they call it, or select your state, and you'll be eligible for any signups for new promotions there in those areas. So for me, North Carolina, we just got legalized sports gambling. It'll be enacted in January of 2025 at the absolute latest. Super excited to bring more gambling content to the show. I'll throw out 2 quick bets for those of you early listeners. I greatly appreciate the support on those of you that jump in the day these go out. This spot is recorded on Halloween night. We'll go out on November 1st, the morning before these games. Wednesday night, the Hornets go to Houston. I like the Hornets at +2. I do think that they can win against the Rockets by at least +2. By at least 2. I think Charlotte has figured out some things defensively, especially with Mark Williams as an anchor. I think their style of play fits if the game goes to a shootout against the Rockets. I think some guys that have had really impressive performances lately, like Brandon Miller and LaMelo and such. I think the Charlotte Hornets look a lot better than they have in years past. Specifically last year, I think the team being healthy to start the year has given them exceptional confidence to start. Again, Mark Williams is going to be a really important factor there to stifle some of Houston's offensive firepower, specifically from Jalen Green and others. But I do like the Charlotte Hornets at +2 there. You get -110 on that. And I'll actually give you 2, and we can parlay them together and see what they look like. Denver's at Minnesota. I like 2 road teams for Wednesday night. You've got the Memphis Grizzlies as well on the road. You've got the Wizards at Atlanta, but I think the value's there for Denver. I like Denver, just what they've shown, as you heard earlier at the beginning of the segment around opening week thoughts. I think Denver -4 on the road at Minnesota. I think Denver's just the better team. I know that Minnesota gave them a really tough time in the playoffs last year. I know they were the only team to really we look at it and, it was 4-1 or whatever, and Denver kind of, zombie walk through game 4. But the Minnesota Timberwolves are a good matchup for the Nuggets, just from being able to throw as many bigs as possible at Nikola Jokic. But Denver right now is playing just like they were at the end of last year, really, really well, passing, great spacing, really valuable minutes there off the bench from what we originally thought was kind of a subpar bench potentially coming into the year. I like the -4. I think Denver will handle them very, very well there. If you parlay those 2 together, by the way, you get -105 on Denver there, so I think that's good value. -110 on Charlotte. You parlay them together, we get +272 on a 2-leg parlay there. So let me know in the comments if you guys are doing that as well. Shout out to Sign Up Expert again if you are thinking about making any sports bets and you want to get into sports gambling and see what it is in your state. You can sign up for any sports betting and daily fantasy new promotion through the link in the description, signupexpert.com/TPP for your exclusive discount. Using that link does support the show as well. We greatly appreciate that. All right, first solo pod of the NBA season. Super excited to be talking about basketball again. Got some really cool stuff coming up as well. I will remind you that the Everything College Basketball podcast and I grouped together and we did the ECB magazine for college basketball. We'll have some content for that next week. Look out for some really cool stuff over there. I'll be talking college basketball, some of my favorite bets coming up next week. College basketball starts officially in 6 days or 5 days as you're hearing this on Wednesday the 1st. Cannot wait. November 6th, Monday, we are back. College basketball. I'll be in the building somewhere here in the middle of North Carolina. I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. But you can check out every single team and preview ecbmagazine.bigcartel.com. We have all of those previews for you there. Almost 300 pages of magazine preview. Super, super exciting stuff. Some really great content in there. Feel free to check that out. It's only $10 to get every single team in the country and find out what your favorite team is going to look like this coming year. I greatly appreciate you guys' time listening today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, it's at 2Pointers on all socials platforms or at the 2Pointers podcast. My links are on the screen there as well. Look forward to putting out more NBA and college basketball content over the next couple of months. This has been the 2Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett. We'll talk to you next week.